She said she was disappointed with God. Not angry, not broken, disappointed the way you are disappointed with someone you still love, someone you still trust, someone whose silence right now is the hardest thing you have ever had to sit with. Savannah Guthrie stood at a podium on Easter Sunday and told the world exactly what 65 days of not knowing has done to her faith. And then she walked into the Today Show on Monday morning and did her job. What she said before those studio doors opened is the most unguarded thing anyone connected to this case has offered the public. And it belongs at the center of this update, because the human cost of this investigation and the investigative details we are about to cover are not separate stories. They are the same story. I am Michelle. This is the Michelle Report. Subscribe right now and hit that bell, because what we are about to go through is the full picture: faith, geography, warrants, and the silence that has become the loudest thing in this case. Let us begin where Savannah Guthrie began on Easter Sunday, because her words deserve the full weight of what they carry. She described feeling utter abandonment. She asked whether Jesus, in the darkness of his crucifixion, the moment when he cried out asking why he had been forsaken, had felt anything like what she was feeling now. She said she was disappointed with God, and then she said she still believed. 3 words sitting on top of 65 days of the worst experience of her life. To understand the weight of that Easter message, you have to understand what the 12 hours after she first learned her mother was missing looked like. Multiple reporting accounts have now filled in that picture in detail, and it is harrowing in a way that is difficult to fully absorb. Savannah was in New York City. Her sister Annie called from Tucson in a panic. Mom is missing. That was the message. And Savannah, doing what any child of an elderly parent does when that call comes, reached immediately for the explanation that made everything okay. A medical episode, an ambulance coming in the night, the back doors propped open because paramedics had wheeled her mother out on a stretcher to get her help. She started calling hospitals from New York, hospital after hospital in the Tucson area. No record of Nancy Guthrie at any of them. Meanwhile, Annie and her husband Tommaso were in the house, and what they were seeing was telling a different story than the one Savannah was trying to build from 3,000 miles away. The house was orderly. The doors were propped. There was blood on the front steps. The Ring camera had been disabled. Nancy's phone and purse and shoes were still there. Everything she would have taken if she had left voluntarily was exactly where she had left it the night before. The 12 hours that followed were what Savannah described as a harrowing odyssey, a family trying to process in real time what was becoming undeniable, while simultaneously hoping there was still one explanation that did not end in terror. There was not. And Savannah Guthrie has been living in the space between that morning and an answer every single day since. Waking up in the middle of the night, in her own words, every single night, imagining her mother's terror. She went to Easter Sunday and she stood before her congregation and she told them the truth, that faith right now is not comfortable, that believing right now costs her something she cannot measure, that she is disappointed and she still believes. And then she went to work. Now let us look at what the investigation actually looks like on the ground, because the geographic dimension of this case has not been given the full weight it deserves. And a former Pima County official is now speaking in ways that reframe the search question entirely. The Catalina Foothills neighborhood where Nancy Guthrie lives sits against the base of the Santa Catalina Mountains north of Tucson. It is described as affluent and enclosed, the kind of community where neighbors recognize each other's vehicles and where strangers stand out because the neighborhood is defined enough that unfamiliar faces register. But 45 minutes outside that neighborhood, not hours, not a difficult journey, 45 minutes, the terrain becomes something that people who have not physically stood in it cannot fully imagine from a description. Crime and cold case investigator Cheryl McCollum went there herself. She did not look at maps or satellite imagery. She went on foot, in the heat, through the terrain, and the word she used, her exact word, was unforgiven. The plants cut you. There are rattlesnakes and bobcats and mountain lions and black bears. The ground is packed as hard as cement, rocks everywhere, dense brush growing above head height. Visibility drops to almost nothing within 20 feet of where you are standing. On the day she arrived, the temperature was 105 degrees, and former SWAT commander Bob Krieger, who spent nearly 30 years working these specific terrain zones and supervised the border crime unit for 5 years, walked journalists through areas where he had personally found multiple homicides victims over his career. Bodies left off roadsides, a serial killer's victims recovered in that specific zone, 3 or 4 homicide victims found together on a single occasion, a road that runs south from that terrain all the way to Mexico, 100 miles. used historically as a corridor for human smuggling and drug trafficking. A former Pima County official is now speaking publicly about the violence and criminal activity connected to that landscape, and about the proximity of Tucson, 60 miles from the Mexican border, to some of the most active trafficking routes in the country. The FBI has already reached out to Mexican authorities in this investigation, not because there is confirmed evidence Nancy Guthrie was taken across the border, because the investigation cannot rule it out, because in a case that appears to have involved a ransom plan that went wrong in ways that have never been publicly explained, the question of where Nancy went after she was walked out her front door remains completely open. McCollum said it directly: there are areas out there that have not been searched. The terrain makes comprehensive searching practically impossible without boots on the ground, people walking it, noticing something small. A bedroom slipper, a piece of jewelry, anything that does not belong to that landscape, not helicopters, not thermal drones, boots, volunteer search organizations, groups with horses, ATVs, specialized equipment, and experienced people who know how to search in exactly this kind of terrain have offered to help. They have not been given access. That decision sits alongside every other decision made by the leadership of this investigation that experienced observers have struggled to justify. There is a geographic detail in this investigation that keeps appearing, and it is time to assemble it in one place: 2 miles. The black gloves containing male DNA were found approximately 2 miles from Nancy Guthrie's home. The FBI's specific public request to the community asked for doorbell camera footage from every resident within a 2-mile radius of Nancy's address. And on a Friday night, federal agents and sheriff's deputies executed 2 search warrants on a property located approximately 2 miles from Nancy Guthrie's front door in the Catalina foothills area of Tucson. 2 judges signed those warrants. One for the residents, one for a gray Range Rover found in the parking lot of a nearby Culver's restaurant, a location investigators had already been examining as part of their vehicle surveillance work from the early days of the case. The man at the center of those warrants is Luke Daly, 37 years old, a Tucson resident. His criminal defense attorney has stated clearly and on the record that he has no link to this case. Daly himself said publicly that he has nothing to do with it. He has not been arrested. He has not been charged. No official law enforcement statement has named him as a suspect. That must be stated with complete clarity. It has been stated, and it will continue to be stated because it is the truth as the public record currently stands. What is also in the public record equally clearly is this: between 2019 and 2020, Daly served a year and a half in state prison. Convictions for drug solicitation, criminal damage, and flight from law enforcement. In 2022, a drug distribution conviction and 4 years of probation. In May of 2025, arrested alongside a woman named Kayla Nalday in a Walmart parking lot with fentanyl and an illegal firearm. A probation revocation was filed. A judge allowed him to remain in the community. As of February 2026, when federal agents executed those warrants, Daly was a convicted felon on active probation with an unresolved fentanyl and firearms case still hanging over him, still in Tucson, still in the Catalina foothills. He already had a criminal defense attorney on retainer before federal agents arrived. That means Daly was not calling a lawyer in a panic. When investigators showed up, he had ongoing legal representation already in place. The night before the Daly raid, law enforcement seized the gray Range Rover from the Culver's lot. That same night, Kayla Nalday, the same person arrested with Daly in the Walmart incident, was detained at her Tucson residence, questioned, released. The following night, the Daly property search. A traffic stop executed on a public road when Daly and his mother left the premises, the legal mechanism that allowed investigators to detain both individuals while the search of the home proceeded. Physical samples collected, statements given, evidence removed from the residence, the Range Rover sealed with evidence tape and towed, 3 operations across 2 consecutive nights, all connected to the same investigation, all within the 2-mile radius that the FBI itself defined as geographically significant. Here is the distinction that matters more than any other single detail in what I just described. When online speculation began targeting members of the Guthrie family, particularly Nancy's son-in-law Tommaso Cioni, Sheriff Chris Nanos did not stay quiet. He went to a podium. He used names. He called the accusations cruel. He called the family victims. He provided an explicit, personal, public defense of each person being targeted by that speculation. That is what cleared sounds like from a sheriff in an active federal investigation. Named defense, explicit statement, public platform. Luke Daly's attorney says his client is clear. Daly himself says it. But the sheriff, the same person who went out of his way to defend the Guthrie family by name on a public platform, has issued no equivalent statement about the man whose home was searched with 2 signed federal warrants. When reporters asked directly whether Daley was no longer a suspect, the sheriff did not say yes. He said, "Does that mean he is not a suspect any longer?" No. We will do our work. We have got evidence to process from the home. A sitting sheriff confirming on camera that the search of a specific property produced material still being analyzed. That is not a routine statement. That is a substantive one. And the absence of the kind of explicit named defense that the Guthrie family received is not an oversight in an investigation this carefully managed. Released and cleared are 2 different words. In this investigation, that difference is not accidental. The DNA picture is the thread that will ultimately determine how this case resolves, and the developments of the past several weeks have added dimensions to it that were not present in the early weeks of the investigation. 2 separate laboratories are now working the DNA evidence from Nancy Guthrie's home. That development, confirmed through reporting, reflects both the complexity of the sample and the level of urgency being applied. A complex mixture, meaning biological material from more than one unknown individual, creates a specific technical challenge, deconvolution, separating the individual profiles from the mixture to isolate a single usable genetic identity. Forensic genetic genealogist C.C. Moore has been publicly specific about what success looks like here. If the unknown perpetrator contributed 40% or more to that mixture, current science can work with it. Below that threshold, the technology is still catching up, but catching up fast, specifically because of the attention this case is generating in the forensic science community. But here is the dimension the recent detentions add. Physical samples were collected from Luke Daley during his detention. His attorney confirmed it. Those samples exist. They can be compared directly against the DNA on the black gloves found 2 miles from Nancy's home. They can potentially be compared against the mixture from the house. Those comparisons do not require genetic genealogy. They do not require deconvolution. They require a standard laboratory comparison between a known sample and recovered evidence. The results of those comparisons have not been publicly disclosed. That is standard procedure in an active federal investigation. Law enforcement does not announce laboratory results while the case is ongoing, but the samples exist. The comparison is possible. And the sheriff's confirmation that evidence from the home search is still being processed means the laboratory work is active. Brian Entin, News Nation's senior national correspondent who has been in Tucson throughout this investigation, confirmed that DNA from the scene has now gone to 2 different labs. Genetic genealogy remains a viable pathway if and when a clean profile is isolated. And the FBI's genetic genealogy team, according to C.C. Moore, is ready to move the moment that profile exists. The science has not given up on this case. It is still working, and working in ways that the public cannot fully see from the outside. The leadership crisis surrounding Sheriff Chris Nanos has moved beyond institutional friction and into documented history. 8 suspensions in a little over 5 years at the El Paso Police Department. Use of force incidents. An individual who reportedly ended up in the hospital. Periods of suspension lasting weeks. Records that Nanos allegedly failed to disclose when he applied to the Pima County Sheriff's Office and that he allegedly denied under oath when directly asked. A Pima County supervisor who sat down with News Nation said it without hedging. He was frankly a bad cop. The supervisor's position, and the position of other supervisors now formally engaged on this question, is that if those records had been known at the time of his hiring, he would not have been hired. Now add the TSA incident, a loaded, undeclared firearm carried through an airport security checkpoint, a federal matter for any private citizen. For the sitting sheriff of a major Arizona county, it is another entry in a pattern that the Board of Supervisors is formally examining. 306 deputies in the union. Every single one voted no confidence. Not a majority, not a strong majority. Every single one. The recall effort is in process. The Board of Supervisors is engaged. Formal agenda items addressing what they describe as recently reported issues concerning the sheriff's work history and apparent related false statements are on the public record. And through all of it, the investigation continues. The rank and file investigators, the ones whose sources inside the department have repeatedly described as tireless, as caring, as carrying the weight of this case with genuine commitment, are not the problem. They deserve better than what has been given to them from the top, and so does Nancy Guthrie. Retired FBI agent Steve Moore, who has analyzed this case extensively in public commentary, made a point that needs to be repeated. The first people to a crime scene make decisions that either send an investigation in the right direction or ruin it permanently. Evidence is perishable. The decisions made in the first hours are the ones that shape everything that comes after. And the decisions made in the first hours of the Nancy Guthrie investigation by a team whose supervisor had never worked a homicide, operating under a theory that she had wandered off, are decisions the case is still paying for. That is not political criticism. That is a forensic accounting of consequence. The desert is speaking. The question is whether anyone is listening carefully enough to hear what it is saying. Former SWAT commander Bob Krieger described the terrain west of Tucson in terms that carry operational weight. He said someone who wanted to dispose of evidence in that landscape would not need to be out of their vehicle for more than 30 seconds. The brush provides immediate concealment. The terrain absorbs whatever is left in it. Wildlife, bobcats, mountain lions, black bears, rodents, degrades organic material in that climate, not in weeks, but in days. A body left in that desert in the summer heat does not remain recognizable for long. A piece of evidence left in brush that grows above head height becomes indigenous to the landscape within days. The colors of the rocks and dirt and sand and plant matter are so varied and so layered that distinguishing something foreign from something native requires not drone footage, but human eyes moving slowly through it at ground level. McCollum said it explicitly: we need boots on the ground, people who know what they are looking for, people who can notice something small, a slipper, a piece of jewelry, a trace that does not belong there. The Cajun Navy and Texas EquiSearch, volunteer organizations with horses, ATVs, experience in exactly this kind of terrain, and a track record of finding things that official search operations have missed, have offered to help. Neither has been given access that would allow the kind of systematic ground search that the terrain demands. That is a choice made by someone with consequences that have not yet been fully accounted for. The investigation cannot search everything. The terrain makes that impossible. But there are people who are willing to try, who have the tools and the expertise to try, and they are sitting on the sidelines while the desert continues to do what the desert does to evidence left in it. Let us assemble the full picture, because the individual threads of this investigation, taken separately, each look like they might be inconclusive. Taken together, they look like something building toward an answer. The 2-mile radius, defined by the FBI's own public request, confirmed by the location of the gloves, confirmed by the address of a searched property. 3 convergences on the same geographic distance. That is not coincidence. That is a targeting logic the FBI established and then followed. The warrants, 2 of them, both signed by a judge who reviewed a probable cause argument that investigators spent days constructing before they ever knocked on a door. The sheriff's own confirmation that evidence was collected and is being processed. The absence of the explicit named clearance that the Guthrie family received. The DNA. 2 labs. Physical samples from detained individuals available for comparison. A complex mixture being worked by scientists whose deconvolution methods are being accelerated specifically because of this case. A forensic genealogist who has said publicly, not as a hope, but as an analytical certainty, that a viable profile produces a name within weeks. The desert, 45 minutes from downtown Tucson. A corridor with documented history of criminal activity, body disposals and connection to the border. A terrain that has not been fully searched and that is, right now, being degraded by heat, wildlife, and the passage of time. The Bitcoin address, watched, unmoving, but watched. The cell tower data from January 11th, January 24th, and February 1st. 1 subpoena at a time, 1 warrant at a time, building towards something. And a daughter who woke up on Easter Sunday, stood at a podium, said she was disappointed with God, said she still believed, and walked back into the Today Show on Monday morning. That is where this case stands at day 65. The thing about faith, the specific kind of faith Savannah Guthrie was describing on Easter Sunday, is that it is not the absence of doubt. It is the decision to keep going in spite of it, to keep believing that what is hidden will come to light, that what has been taken can be returned, that the silence is not the final word. I still believe. She said it knowing exactly what it cost, knowing that 65 nights of waking up in the dark and imagining her mother's terror had not been resolved by prayer or by hope or by the thousands of people keeping a candle lit for Nancy Guthrie from Tucson to Florida and everywhere in between. She said it anyway. Nancy Guthrie is 84 years old. She was taken from the home she had lived in for 50 years, in the middle of the night, in her pajamas, without her shoes. She left behind the phone that was supposed to connect her to the people she loved. She left behind the purse that contained everything a person carries when they intend to come back. She was taken by someone who had studied her, who had been in that neighborhood before, who knew the yard well enough to find her flower pots in the dark, who planned this across weeks and executed it in 40 minutes and has not been publicly identified. Not yet. The DNA is in 2 labs. Physical samples from at least 1 detained individual are available for comparison. The sheriff confirmed evidence is still being processed from a search property 2 miles from Nancy's door. The desert terrain has not given up what it may be holding. And the FBI is still working. 1 warrant, 1 subpoena, 1 database query at a time. The reward is over $1 million. The FBI tip line is 1-800-KAL-FBI. Anonymous. No arrest required. No conviction required. If you were in the Catalina foothills in January, if you saw a vehicle or a person that did not fit, if you have been carrying something for 65 days that you were not sure mattered, it matters. Make the call. Nancy Guthrie deserves to come home. Her daughter is standing at an anchor desk right now saying, I still believe, and meaning every word of it. Give her something to believe in. We stay on this case. We do not move on until there are answers. If this video gave you something, share it right now. Like it so more people find it. And if the Mitchell Report is new to you, this is what we do. We go deeper. We stay longer. We fight for the people this country forgets when the cameras move on. I am Mitchell Report. Thank you for watching.